Chapter 4. Arya. Arya watched Gabby walk away, the blue smoke swirling around her shoulders. She waited a moment, then hopped up from the couch and followed. Gabby had vanished around a corner, but thin tendrils of smoke trailed behind her, and soon enough Arya caught sight of her, near the end of the pale blue hall. She was standing outside a door, staring in. Arya hesitated. She wanted to go over to Gabby, but she thought it would seem strange, her showing up so soon after they'd said goodbye. Better if she could stay with Gabby for a little while without the girl knowing. If only she could watch unseen. Was that possible? Arya wondered, looking down at her hands, something she knew with absolute clarity. What she was meant to do, what she couldn't do, what she mustn't do. But what she could do, and what she should do, those things were muddy, blurred. Only one way to find out, thought Arya. Staring down at her hands, she willed herself to disappear. At first, nothing happened. And then, between one blink and the next, she was gone. She'd expected something slow and spreading, the way color did through her laces, but she didn't bleed out of sight. She just vanished. She could feel the linoleum beneath her shoes, but there were no shoes to see. Arya shivered a little. She didn't like it. What if she could undo it? She wanted to undo it. And just like that, she was there again. Green top and blue leggings, and pink laces in the hall. Arya sighed with relief. What an unpleasant thing, being invisible. It made her feel less real. But it was necessary. And now that Arya knew she could undo the illusion, she took a deep breath, made herself invisible again, and joined Gabby in front of the door. Gabby was peering in through a glass insert, and as Arya looked over her shoulder, she could see what Gabby saw in the room. A boy in a bed. It had to be Gabby's brother, Marco. He was propped up against several pillows, sleeping. He wasn't what Arya had pictured, not frail, like the other boy, Henry. No, Marco was broad-shouldered with dark brown hair and golden skin. Gabby was about to turn the knob when a woman called to her from down the hall. "Gabrielle," said the woman, her voice tense. She had ceased between her eyebrows and circled under her eyes. And she looked like an older, sadder version of Gabby. Arya guessed that she was her mother. "Where have you been?" she asked. Gabby's hand fell away from the door. "I was wandering." "Well, you've had me wandering all over this place looking for you." "I'm sorry," said Gabby automatically. I was just trying to stay out of the way." She turned back towards the door. "How's Marco?" "Sleeping again," answered her mom, softening. "I'm going to stay with him a while longer." "I can stay too." Miss Torres shook her head. "I want you to go home." "It isn't home," muttered Gabby under her breath. Her mom tutted. "Don't talk back, just go." Gabby's shoulders slumped. "And if I'm not there by 9:30, added her mom, "I want you in bed." "But you'll be there in the morning, right?" asked Gabby. "To wish me luck?" Miss Torres' brows crinkled in confusion, and then her eyes widened. Yes, of course," she said. "Big day, mija. You have everything you need? All your supplies?" Gabby nodded. "I think so." "7th grade," said her mom, voice tight. "When did you grow up?" It was a small question, said more to herself than her daughter. Arya saw the pain in Gabby's face, but the girl only shrugged and said, "I need to grab my things." She slipped silently into Marco's room. Arya stayed in the hall with Gabby's mom. Arya could see the question flicker like a light behind the woman's eyes. "When did you grow up?" And for a moment, it was like Gabby's mom had looked at her daughter and actually seen her. Arya willed Gabby's mom to hold on to that glimmer, but a second later, Miss Torres' pockets gave a shrill double beep. By the time she dug the phone out, the glimmer was fading. By the time she answered, the glimmer was gone. She started talking rapidly in Spanish and was halfway down the hall with her cell pressed to her ear by the time Gabby reappeared. shopping bag in hand. Arya watched Gabby with her mother. Gabby's mouth was pressed into a small, sad line. Arya at that that moment was Miss Torres saw her daughter was just that, a moment. And Arya could tell from the disappointed look on Gabby's face that it was a rare moment. Even though Gabby was trying to hold it together in the hall, Arya could tell that she was upset, hurt, and suddenly Arya understood something. Gabby wanted to be noticed. She wanted to be seen. And Arya was the one who was going to help her. She didn't know exactly how, but she would find a way. It was a way she was here. It was her job, her purpose. Gabby started off down the hall, and Arya followed. Down the elevator and through the lobby and past the revolving doors. Arya nearly collided with the glass because she couldn't see herself in it, and down those horrible gray steps. Arya paused to cast a last glance at the hospital. The sun was sinking and the low light glinting against the building, making it look sharp, unwelcoming. When she turned back, Gabby had gotten a ways ahead, and Arya had to run to catch up. As she reached her side, she noticed something. Gabby had started to hum. It was nothing more than a small, wandering melody, but it was lovely. Arya didn't know if all people sounded as nice when they sang, and she was about to try when she remembered her current invisible state. So she kept her mouth shut and listened. The sound filling her with warmth, the melody had an effect on Gabby too. As she hummed, her shoulders began to loosen, the strain going out of her face. And then Gabby came to a stop in front of an apartment building and looked up. The humming trailed off, the easy song replaced by heavy silence. Gabby took a deep breath, climbed the steps to the front door, and went inside. Arya moved to following, but by the time she got to the door, it had fallen shut again. When she tried the handle, it didn't move. Arya frowned. It hadn't been locked. Gabby had gone right in. She could hear her fading footsteps. But when Arya tried it again, it wouldn't budge. She willed the door open, the way she willed herself invisible, the way she'd willed her shoelaces to change colors. But it didn't work. Weird, she thought. It should be so simple, opening something that's closed. Certainly easier than disappearing. But Arya couldn't do it. Was she not strong enough yet? Or was it somehow breaking a rule? Arya gazed up at the building, which was 8 stories tall and 5 windows wide, and wondered which apartment belonged to Gabby. She thought about going for a walk or making her way back to the hospital, but now that she'd found the blue smoke, found Gabby, it was like a thread connecting them, a thread with only so much length, and Arya felt an uncomfortable tightness in her chest at the thought of testing its reach. Overhead, a light turned on. 4 floors up and 1 window over. When Arya squinted, she could almost see a curl of blue smoke up there. Gabby's apartment. Arya looked around. All she needed was a way up. The simple answer would to be fly. But Arya didn't know if she could do that without wings. She closed her eyes and tried to picture herself airborne. But when she opened her eyes, she was still standing on the ground. Fine then. If she couldn't fly, she would climb. The moment she thought it, a ladder appeared, simple and wooden, and running all the way from the grass to the apartment roof 8 floors up. Strange powers, thought Arya as she brought her hand to a lower rung and began to climb. Up 4 stories she went. She wasn't afraid of heights until she reached Gabby's window. Gabby was nowhere to be seen, but Arya could hear humming and the opening and closing of drawers in the kitchen. She took off one hand off the ladder and tried to open the window. It wouldn't budge. Arya made a small indignant sound. A ladder, out of nothing. And she still couldn't manage to open something closed. It had to be a rule. Arya mentally added, cannot trespass, to the short list of things she knew she couldn't do. Right under, cannot heal the sick and cannot fly, I think. And then she sighed. Wrapping her arms around the ladder, she tried to decide what she could do. She couldn't, well, she shouldn't, just stand there outside the window all night. It was uncomfortable, and probably a little creepy, even if she was invisible. She either needed to climb down or climb up. The setting sun was streaking colors across the sky, and Arya wanted to be closer to it, so she chose up. The ladder ended at the tip of the roof, and Arya swung her leg over. When she stood at top of the apartment building, feeling as if she were on top of the world, she finally allowed herself to become visible again. She looked down at her hands and let out a relieved sigh. Surprised at how much effort it had taken to be invisible, every moment she couldn't see herself, she felt the need to remind herself she was still there, still real. She spent a few moments making sure every bit of her was back, from legs and arms to laces, still pink, and her bracelet. In the fading light, she examined the blue circling her wrist, and noticed something she hadn't before. There were small loops woven through the material, rings where charms could be added. 3 of them. Her heart jumped. Was that how many people she needed to help? Was that how she would earn her wings? Arya's spirits lifted at the thought. 3 people. True, she hadn't even succeeded in helping one person yet, but she would. She would help Gabby get rid of her smoke, and she'd be a full step closer to a pair of wings. She turned her attention back to the sky. It was memorizing the way it changed. She watched the oranges slide into pinks and then deeper purples, shifting and then fading into darkness. The sky made her think of Gabby who was fading, too, becoming invisible even though she didn't want to be. Marco's sickness was loud and bright and big enough to make everything else feel small. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. But it was time for Gabby to find her light, find her voice. Arya smiled. She couldn't wait for tomorrow, because tomorrow Gabby would go to school and Arya would be with her.